Hello, everybody. Welcome to Having Your Say. I'm Robbie Smith. This program brings you mostly good news stories, stories to inspire, educate, and inform. And as I always say, you don't want to miss a single moment of our program, especially today. My guest is someone we all should know. She is the Honorable Joy V. Cunningham, Illinois Supreme Court Justice for Judicial District 1, and that includes Cook County, where there are a lot of people, in fact, over 5 million people in Cook County. Justice Cunningham's career include having served as a judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County, as well as a justice of the Illinois Appellate Court. I think during this Black History Month, it's really important to emphasize that Justice Cunningham was the first Black woman to be elected president of the Chicago Bar Association. What a great honor. She was leading the largest municipal bar in the country. So such a wonderful thing to you, Justice Cunningham, on this African American History Month. Also, Justice Cunningham's legal career includes serving as an assistant attorney general and judicial clerk to the Illinois Appellate Justice Glenn Johnson. Wow, just think, being in the Illinois Attorney General's office, she has such an impressive career. And also, she's an avid volunteer. She's had various private sector jobs. And would you believe that at one time, Justice Cunningham served as an emergency room nurse? I have to ask her about that. So this is such an impressive career, and there's much more to come. So with that, I want to warmly welcome to our show the Honorable Justice Joy V. Cunningham of the Illinois Supreme Court, Judicial District 1. Welcome, Judge Cunningham. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Robbie, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to your listeners. I think this is really important. It's Black History Month, and I am honored to be talking to your audience.
I tell you, now I'm going to talk definitely about your judicial and legal work, but tell me about your serving as an emergency room nurse.
Well, I wasn't an emergency room nurse. I was an ICU nurse. Okay. I worked in the intensive care unit. My undergraduate degree, surprisingly, is in nursing. I have a Bachelor of Science in nursing. So I was a nurse before I became a lawyer. In fact, I worked in the ICU for 3.5 years, nights, to pay for my law school education. So being an intensive care nurse was something that I found not only useful earlier on for teaching me many things which later became important when I became a judge, things such as learning how to listen, learning how to care for people when they're at their lowest ebb, really learning how to problem solve, learning how to talk to the families of people who find themselves in dire straits through no fault of their own. These are all qualities that I think helped me during my judicial career. And certainly, I think most judges could use those qualities as well. So being a nurse was, in my view, I think of it as training for life. And it certainly helped me in my judicial career. And it helped me to pay for law school. Oh, and as yes. You know, being an intensive care nurse was intense. It was an intense situation that really taught me problem solving and the kinds of intensity of focus that I think judges should and could have.
I think that is really important and critical to your work today, especially because healthcare is one of the primary issues in our world today, and Absolutely. Having that background, that experience really gives you kind of the upper hand in a way. So in talking about your career, tell us, how did you make the jump from being a nurse to being a lawyer?
Well, it wasn't something that happened in a single aha moment. It was more of an evolution where I worked as a nurse and did lots of volunteer work when I was a nurse. And I am naturally a person that likes to help people. In fact, that's my family. It's kind of my family value. I grew up in a family that valued education and public service. And so as a nurse, I did a lot of volunteer work in addition to my regular nursing job. And I wasn't like a lot of young people who go to college. I wasn't really settled in what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And over time, it just became clear to me that a legal career would be something that would enhance what I would be able to do as a public servant. And that's what happened. So it was more of an evolution than a single aha moment. And I went to law school and was able to pay for my law school education because I had a nursing degree and significant experience as a critical care nurse.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to get some information on that background because it leaped out at me because it was so unusual, so different from the legal information I had on you, your judicial work. So I thought I'd ask you about that thing first, about being a nurse. And you told us how it's really helped to prepare you for where you are today. So let's get to why you're on my show today. And of course, you are running to be elected, well, to maintain the current position you have in the Illinois Supreme Court. So why don't you tell us about the position that you're in, and we'll move forward from there.
Okay. When Justice Burke retired in 2022, the Illinois Supreme Court looked at all of the appellate court justices. There are 24 appellate court justices, and they selected me from the 24 appellate court justices to succeed Ann Burke. And I felt very honored and humbled for them to have made that selection. But the Constitution says when you are selected in that way, you must stand for election in your own right at the next scheduled election. In other words, the voters must ratify the choice of the Supreme Court. And I am hopeful and expecting voters to do that because I've been found highly qualified by the Chicago Bar Association, the Cook County Bar Association, which incidentally is the oldest African-American bar association in the United States, the Women's Bar Association, the Black Women Lawyers Association, the Chicago Council of Lawyers, the Illinois State Bar Association, and many others. So I am already doing the job. I've been in the job since 2022. I've been found highly qualified by the bar associations, and more importantly, my colleagues have given me high marks for being able to grow into the job so quickly and being able to work with the other members of the court in a very productive way.
Well, tell us something. People like myself, the electorate really don't know a lot about the courts. We vote, a lot of people skip, the voting, the judges section of the ballot because mostly I think because we're uninformed, we don't know enough about all of you. So I want to ask you first, what is your job? What do you do on a regular basis? And also, I understand that justices usually have clerks clerking for them. So how many clerks do you have and how do you select them?
Okay, I'll start first by telling you just a little bit about the Supreme Court in general. State Supreme Courts in Illinois, it's no different, have become so much more important than they used to be in terms of interpreting the Constitution, because the federal court system has shifted away from individual rights like reproductive rights, voters' rights, other types of civil rights, and all of the constitutional protections that we used to rely on the federal courts to provide have now been shifted to the states. A good example of that is the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So now the states' Supreme Courts are being called upon to do things that the federal courts previously had within their purview. So Illinois is no different. The state Supreme Court is the head of the third branch of government, and people don't think of the court system as the third branch of government, but it absolutely is. And in my opinion, it's probably the most important of the three branches for a number of reasons. Number one, the Supreme Court is the body that determines whether the other two branches of government are staying in their lanes. What do I mean by that? For example, if the legislature passes a law that's unconstitutional, it's the Illinois Supreme Court that has the power to strike that law from the books and nullify the law. If the governor issues an executive order that's found to be unconstitutional, it's the Supreme Court that makes the judgment as to whether or not that law passes constitutional muster. So we have a real important responsibility as being the keepers of the Constitution and the gatekeepers, if you will, of democracy in our state. A recent example of that is the assault weapons ban, which came before the Illinois Supreme Court, and the Safety Act, which nullified cash bail in the state of Illinois, and the Biometric Information Privacy Act. Those are three really important cases, probably three of the most important cases ever heard by Illinois Supreme Court. And I had the honor and the privilege of being on the court and participating in those cases. So the court is a gatekeeper of the Constitution. It is also an administrator of the third branch of government. And in order to do that, the court has a vast administrative responsibility that most people are unaware of. When I'm asked what's the most surprising thing about my job on the Supreme Court, I always say it's the amount of administrative responsibility that the court has. Illinois has 102 counties, and there's a courthouse in every one of them. And we're responsible for what goes on in those 102 courthouses. We have the state probation system that falls under the court, the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, all thousands of attorneys in the state. The agency that administers that falls under the Supreme Court. The MCLE board, which is an agency that administers continuing education for lawyers and judges throughout the state. That's an agency of the Supreme Court, and so on. It's a lot of administrative work to keep a large court system like the court system in Illinois running. So our administrative reach and responsibility is extensive. So in addition to deciding important cases, we also administer the third branch of government. There are 7 Supreme Court justices. We are taken from 5 districts across the state. Cook County is District 1. 3 of the 7 justices come from Cook County, and I'm one of those 3. And then there's 1 each from each of the other 4 districts. Currently, each justice has 4 law clerks. We all have 4 law clerks who help us with doing the research and drafting. As you can imagine, the cases that we hear are significant. So it's impossible for us to do all of that ourselves. Our law clerks they are all bright, the cream of the crop in terms of young lawyers and lawyers. Law clerks are lawyers, and they're always lawyers who have graduated high in their class, and they're basically the cream of the crop, and they serve as our eyes and ears. So that's a brief summary of what we do and how we do it.
Education, because as I mentioned, we don't really know anything about the courts. What we do, only thing we know is what we see on the news. We know big issues that come up, and that a decision is made, and we wonder what the Supreme Court or the appellate court or whomever is going to do, but we're not educated. Civic education to me is so valuable, and for some reason, not enough of that has been done over the years. I don't know if you agree with me.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. Civics isn't taught in school anymore, and I find that the populace in general have suffered. You know, if you ask 10 people on the street to tell you how many justices are on the Illinois Supreme Court, most people don't know. And if you say there are 3 branches of government, tell me what they are, you'd be surprised that many people don't know. And so I think you're absolutely right, Robbie. This is a civic responsibility for us to inform the public of not only all 3 branches of government, but the judiciary, which in many respects is the branch that's going to be impactful on the lives of individual citizens, more so than who your state senator is or who your state legislator is.
That's right. In the courtroom, a traffic ticket, no matter what happens. Yes, and we need to be educated. And one of the things, Justice Cunningham, that I will be doing leading up to the presidential election, focusing on civic education and voting, because I believe that the non-voter is the largest voting bloc. In some way, we have to find a way to get them off of their, backs and go out and vote. So I just want you to know I'm going to be focusing on that. We'll move forward. Tell us a little bit about Judicial District 1.
Okay, Judicial District 1 encompasses all of Cook County. And as you mentioned earlier, there are 5 million people in give or take, in Judicial District 1. And that is the reason that there are 3 Supreme Court justices from District 1, because we are the most populous of the judicial districts throughout the state. And, being one of 3 is very interesting because we have to work collaboratively. And Cook County is a very large geographical area. If Cook County happened to be a state, it would be the 14th largest state by population and geography. It is a large area. So working collaboratively with the other 2 justices is essential for us to get anything done.
So are you separated, or everything you do is done jointly, or how does that work?
Okay. Let me start from the beginning. The main Supreme Court building is in Springfield. And when we hear cases that come before the court for oral argument, that's done in Springfield. But when we're not in term, and the expression is the court is in term, that means when the court is not hearing cases or in Springfield doing our administrative things, we are in our home districts. In the 1st district, that home district is the Belandic building on LaSalle Street, and all 3 Supreme Court justices, we all have our chambers here in Cook County. And we collaborate on matters that are peculiar to the 1st district, like the appointment of judges to the circuit court, or the appointment of judges to the appellate court, or judicial orders that pertain only to the 1st district. We collaborate on those matters, and we're housed in the same location, so it's easy for us to meet. Now, the other justices throughout the state, they are very far flung. So the justice who is the justice for the 5th district, for example, he lives in Mount Vernon, Illinois, and that's where his office is. That's pretty far south. The justice for the 2nd district, she lives very far north, close to the Wisconsin border, and so on. And the 4th district justice lives south of Springfield. So we're all over the states in our different districts. So when we come together in Springfield for the term, we all have apartments we're the only state Supreme Court that has living quarters in the court building above the courthouse where we live. where we live during that period of time, we have small one-bedroom apartments. It's more like a studio apartment that we get to decorate however we want. And we live there for the time that the court is in term. And the court is in term specific times throughout the year, and it's spelled out right in the Constitution. So you can look at the Illinois Constitution and know when the court is going to be in term. It's in term September, November, January, March, and May. Those 5 months, the second and third weeks of those 5 months, the court is in term in Springfield.
That is so interesting. Well, great education. You've already given me a great education, and I'm sure our viewers as well. Let me ask you this. What is the difference between the responsibilities of a circuit court judge and a sub-circuit court judge? What's the difference between those two?
Well, there's no difference in terms of their duties. The difference comes in how they're elected. The sub-circuit system was designed to bring diversity to the courts, to the judiciary. And the sub-circuit system was instituted in 1992. And the reason for that is because prior to that, people of color and other ethnic groups were poorly represented in the judiciary. So the legislature sought to develop a sub-circuit system in Cook County only. This was only in Cook County because this had the largest concentration of judges in the state of Illinois, but they were not diverse. So the sub-circuit system essentially injected diversity into the selection or the election of judges. And the way it did that was to carve out specific geographical areas as a sub-circuit. And in order to get elected to the judiciary, you had to live in that sub-circuit. So, for example, if you lived on the west side of Chicago, you were in the 7th sub-circuit. If you lived in Boys Town, which is uptown area, you were in the 8th sub-circuit. So by that, by dividing the area, Cook County, up into sub-circuits, it made it possible for people ethnic groups that were concentrated in certain areas to be able to elect judges from their communities to the bench. But once you're elected to the bench, you're not limited. The criteria for election is the same, whether you live in a sub-circuit or you're just county-wide. So once you're elected, you still have the same responsibilities, the same duties as any other judge. But it completely revolutionized the diversity of the judiciary in Illinois, in Cook County.
Yeah, that's kind of a good example to me of providing equity, making it possible, to lift you up.
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that. What about in looking at your campaign, the voting? There's so much conversation these days about younger voters not voting. There's just the chatter around. So
yes.
What's on your mind regarding the campaign that you're in? Is there anything particular you want us to know that I haven't asked already?
Well, I think it's very important. As I said earlier, state Supreme Courts have become more important than at any time in our history, simply because of what's happening or what's not happening on the federal court system. So who sits on your state Supreme Court is even more important than it used to be. And we have so much more responsibility, and trying to educate younger voters to that it's a challenge. But I think it's something that really the campaigns are really being driven in many respects by the dynamics of the time that we live in. For example, I'm doing a lot more on social media than I would have done 10 years ago, because that's where I'm going to reach the voters of a younger age who may be interested in knowing, why should I vote for this person? What has she done? What does she stand for? And what's this all about anyway? All of that is something that a platform, the social media platforms are the places now where I think a lot of election information is being dispensed, because that's where our younger voters are. And it's very important that they understand their vote counts. And it's kind of a cliche, but it's so true. And I'm of the generation where I understand, recognize, and respect that many, many people died so that people of color could have the right to vote.
Yes.
And it's so far removed from young people these days that they don't think of that. But I think it's important to remind them from time to time.
What I want to do now is ask you to give whatever closing remarks or appeal that you would like to make to our viewers in support of your campaign.
Thank you so much, Robbie, for this opportunity. And thank you to your viewers and your listeners. I think it's really important to educate yourself about civic responsibility. And the Illinois Supreme Court is at the top of the third branch of government. So who sits on that court it's really, really important that you get the right people. The Supreme Court picked me from 24 appellate court justices, and they know what it takes to do the job. So the fact that they selected me, I think, is entitled to a certain amount of deference and understanding that they picked someone that can do the job or to hold that position. Additionally, I was the president and CEO of the Chicago Bar Association, which is the largest municipal bar association in the nation, which made me the first African-American woman to lead a major non-legacy bar association. So I say all of this to tell you that I bring a wealth of information and experience to the job of being a Supreme Court justice. And yes, it is a job. It's a career, it's a job, but it's also a calling. I bring all of that to the table. And I like to tell people, no matter what your race, sexual orientation, gender, national origin, religion, I am your Supreme Court justice. And I really, really would like to continue being your Supreme Court justice. I think it's really important that your viewers go out and vote. And early voting in Cook County starts on February 15th. So go to the polls early. You never know what the weather is going to be like on election day. So go early, vote early, and vote for me, Joy Virginia Cunningham. I am your Supreme Court justice. And with your support, I will continue being your Supreme Court justice. Thank you so much, Robbie. And thank you, viewers and listeners. Please continue to educate yourself about the court system and vote for me, Joy Virginia Cunningham.